You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Tonight we welcome in Arique Dross III, founder and attorney at the Dross Law Firm in New York City. And Arique is certified by the state of New York and qualified to represent parents and children in an array of family law matters that range from custody, visitation, and orders of protection to termination of parental rights, neglect, abuse, and more in both family court and Supreme Court. Arique, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Benny. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad to have this platform to share my story, so thank you.
Yeah, and speaking of your story, I have to say it was you have quite a remarkable story. It's definitely one. I mean, I don't judge anybody's story. I think everybody has their own path to the law. Everybody took a different way. But yours is like the quintessential lawyer story. I mean, you really you fought through a lot of things to get to where you are, and now you're helping kids. And we're going to go into that a little bit. And we featured you on Lawyer Stories about 5 months ago, and wow, our community loved it. It was tremendous, and one thing I wanted to start off with, like I noticed right on your LinkedIn, right actually where it has like your title, it says former foster child and juvenile delinquent. So, and on your lawyer story, you started with, I'm not supposed to be where I'm at, period. So tell us why those things. So you obviously, you have that right away in LinkedIn, and then you have it right away in your lawyer story. So obviously those are two very important pieces of you and your identity. So do you want to share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Being a foster child, juvenile delinquent, it's kind of who I am. It was a very humble beginning for me. I will start from the very beginning. I was born in Florida. We moved to Brooklyn, New York when I was about 1 year old, and we eventually made it over to Staten Island, New York, where I grew up most of my childhood. At some point in time, I entered foster care. It was me and my three brothers. It was four of us at the time. We entered foster care. And, from there, it was kind of like this survival mode, because we didn't enter foster care just one time. It was at least 3 times from what I recall as a child. We went to foster care, we went back home, re-entered foster care, went back home. So it was this cycle of just continuously being neglected. So being a foster child, juvenile delinquent, that's who I am. And it's not a day that passes where I don't forget where I started, because it motivates me to continue to do what I'm doing now, representing children, representing parents in the similar situations where I've been.
It's amazing. So tell us a little bit about more like the foster care. I don't know if everybody's familiar with the system. So I read that in your lawyer story, you said like some families get like thousands for bringing kids in. Some get hundreds, and some houses you find love in, and other houses you don't. It's more, the parents are looking to make a dollar.
Yeah. I remembered vividly my first foster home. It was in the Bronx, actually. And the very first home we were placed in, when we got into a kind of stranger care, we were without family. They split me and my siblings up. I had 2 other sisters who were born after this. It was an amazing home. It was a Spanish family. Remember, they used to cook dinner every night. We had our own bed, and I had an older foster brother. He used to play video games with me. So it was very cool. I was young. I think it was maybe 11 or 12. So I had someone to look to. But I also remember that at the time we had to move back somewhere closer to Staten Island because visitation was hard. And so at that point, we just started bouncing from home to home. We became more separated. It was no longer three siblings here, three siblings here. It was kind of wherever you can fit, that's where you have to go.
And that's where they put you. They don't care about keeping everybody together.
They're supposed to. You would think that, there's laws in the books and policies that they're supposed to keep siblings together. But remember, a lot of these foster parents don't have the capacity to take 5, 6 kids at once. Or if they do, a lot of these foster parents don't want to take older kids because these older kids are set in their ways. They're troublemakers. They rather not deal with that. They'll deal with the younger kids, which are, easier and they're more mendable in their ways. So it was just moving from foster home to foster home, trying to figure out how to fit in. New foster parents, new foster siblings, new environment, new area in the community. And you knew that these foster parents were getting paid to take care of you. It wasn't like going with family who I have a relationship with, if they love me genuinely. You knew they were getting paid to do what they do. So it was kind of a ingenuine relationship, really artificial,
Gotcha.
Going into a foster home.
So how many did you switch up? Like, how do you remember, like, how many you went to? Yeah.
I would say it was about 24, starting from the Bronx, that very first home. I was in every borough you could think of.
Wow.
During my time in foster care from about 10 to 21 years old.
24, that's 24.
24. I was all in Long Island at one point. I remember when I was in Long Island, I was in high school. I went to Tottenville High School in Staten Island, probably the furthest point in Staten Island could be. I used to have to wake up early in the morning in Long Island, almost 2.5 hours just one way, traveling myself just to make sure I get to school on time, 8 o'clock in the morning, because I didn't want to transfer schools to Long Island, to a new environment, make new friends. I wanted an environment I was already used to. So I've been around.
So how did you get to school? You took like the train or something?
The Long Island Railroad.
Yeah.
To the MTA trains, to the Staten Island Ferry, to either the train system or the bus system on Staten Island, and then vice versa on the way back home. It was insane. It was very tiring too. Can you imagine, 17, 16-year-old waking up that early just to go to school? When you get to school, you're tired from the trip.
Right. So, that's crazy. So, and probably you can't do any activities because you got to grab the railroad back.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's wild. And so, how do you keep in touch with your siblings throughout that time?
I believe at some point I had a phone.
Okay.
When I got a little older, they had little psychics out back then.
Yeah.
But before that, I think it was like sibling visitation most of the time.
Okay.
Taken to the foster care agency to go see your parents, to see your siblings. If you were lucky, you knew who your other sibling was, so you could just go to their house. At one point, I was living on one street with my brother, and my other younger brother was on the street over with another foster family. So I knew I could just walk around the corner, go see him if I wanted to. But there was a point in time I didn't know where my sisters were, so there was months at a time I would not see my younger sisters, and they were babies, so I couldn't even establish a relationship with them, which affects me to this day because a lot of my siblings don't even know who I am because they grew up in the foster care system, and when I aged out, they were still stuck in the system.
So how many siblings total? You said you had 3 brothers and then 2 sisters?
Yeah, so right now I'm the eldest of probably 10 siblings now today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you say age out, like what that's 18, and like what happens then?
Yeah, so in New York, you age out at 18 to become an adult. So to stay in foster care, you have to continuously consent. You go to court, you tell the judge you want to consent to remain, because there are benefits to staying in the system at that age. They help pay for college, driver's ed, things like that.
Okay.
So I aged out at 21. I had an extra 3 years in foster care where I use that to my advantage. They helped me find an apartment, helped me apply for college and school, and pay for books and any extracurricular activities I needed, my security guard license. So I definitely took advantage of that. But I aged out at 21, and that's when I moved to North Carolina to start law school. They had helped me sign my new lease in North Carolina, and they paid a couple months actually for me to live out there.
Wow, that's amazing. Can you take us back to, like, I know a big part of your story was like juvenile detention and like Riker's Island. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? And then I definitely want to move on to, like, the more highlights and upbeat stuff, law school and
Of
your
course.
firm today. But I'm really curious about that piece of your story.
So that portion of my life, my juvenile delinquency and my time at Rikers, I'll start with the juvenile delinquency. That was a point of where I was out on the streets following older foster siblings. So the people I lived with, they were older than me. They appeared cooler to me and wanted to do what they did.
Mhm.
Want to come home at night and follow curfew. So, I made some really poor decisions as a child. It was over sneakers, I remember. It was over sneakers. That's how I end up as a juvenile delinquent. Um, I wanted something that I didn't have as a foster child. So I
Yep.
went and got it on my own. It was a very poor decision. Um, but it goes to show you how, as a foster child, how you survive. You try to survive. You try to fit in because it was, the sneakers I got were the sneakers that were trendy then, right? So when
Right.
I went to
Right.
school, I wanted to be that boy that other kids had those sneakers. I wanted those sneakers. I wasn't getting as much money as a child. I wasn't working. Again, I was with the foster family. They weren't giving me everything. You were lucky if you got allowance, $25, $50 here and there.
Yep.
Foster family, and even that is not enough to buy sneakers.
Do they
Um,
encourage you to work though, like when you're 15 or 16, foster families?
Not really. Not at that age. I would say definitely 17, 18. It was more a focusing on working. When I was younger, it was more going to school. Some foster families didn't even ask. You come to the door, they don't ask you about your day. You just,
Yeah.
where you sleep, you go to your bed, and then that's it. I mean, it was no different than probably being home in the circumstances where they try to take you away from. They just put you back in with somebody who had a license saying they're able to care for children.
Wow. Yeah.
My time, my time in as a juvenile delinquent, I spent 2 years throughout detention centers, residential treatment centers, um, and that when you're young. I'm gonna start there. I was very young, maybe I think 13 or 14 years old when I was in these detention centers. And a lot of the kids are 16, 17. I was in Spofford. I was in Crossroads. At that point in time, it was scary. I remember it was scary being in that situation because when I first entered, they'll have somebody come up to you, like another kid, and asking you, you're going to send that in. And what that meant was like, you get a snack every night. You're going to give me that snack. And I remember I said no the very first night. I was like, no, I'm not. And I'm like, oh snap, what's gonna happen the next day? Because we're behind these locked doors when I'm saying no, but the next day I'm gonna be with
Right.
the whole group of kids. But that was another thing, adjustment for me fitting in. I learned to fit in with the other, I guess, juveniles around me, survive. The things you do to buy time in those places is play spades, do push-ups with each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember just having this little room, if you can imagine, with this little rectangle window, and you would look out when I was at Crossroads. You could see East New York, people just walking by, and you're like, wow, if I had another chance to be out there, what would I do? Kids walking by, and you're just wondering, when am I going to get out of here? So eventually, I went to a residential treatment center where you do this program, you complete the program, and then you're able to go back home. I went back home with my mom. We end up being in foster care again. Eventually, I think that was the third time. And then I remember when I was 17 years old, that's when I got picked up on my 18th birthday. I did what I did when I was 17. They waited till I was 18 and they picked me up
Wow.
in the morning and charged me as an adult. So that I
Like on
remember
your birthday?
on my birthday, December
Wow.
14th, 18, on my birthday, they picked me up. I remember the whole process. They interrogated me, the things we learned in school, the Miranda, reading me my
Yeah.
rights.
Everything.
It was surreal. It really was. I was in the lineup. I remember they made us put like a baseball cap on for the lineup, um, the whole nine. And then the next thing you know, I'm going to Rikers Island. And you hear a lot of stories on the
Yeah.
outside of Rikers Island, how
Yeah.
terrible it is, how bad it is. So you're already like, oh shit, you're scared. You're about to go to this terrible place. But once you're on the bus with other because you're with adults and other juveniles going to Rikers, and you hear what's going to happen, oh, they're going to ask you what you jacking and stuff. So you got to be ready to say this, or you got to be ready to hit somebody if they, say the wrong thing to you. You got to seem tough. So I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm 18 years old. I've never been to an adult jail, only juvenile detention. So I remember going to Rikers that first night. It was kind of just, you know, eyeing everyone and making sure that I'm safe. I'm safe, really.
Yeah.
When they place you on Rikers as a adolescent, at least back then, I don't believe they do this anymore, but back then, think of a big camp where the beds are lined up side by side.
Yeah.
Talking about 30, maybe 30, 40 adolescents lined up side by side. Okay. A lot of probably testosterone going on in the room. A lot of people thinking they're high and macho. So I get there
Yeah.
at night time, actually. Everyone's sleeping, which is good. So I don't have to do like the walk of this new guy on the
Yeah.
block.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I'm laying down to go to sleep, I remember I'm waking up by somebody. He's saying, what are you jacking? And I said, nothing. I said, nothing. I didn't want to deal with any of that. And I fell back to sleep.
What does that like even mean? I don't know if I really know what that.
So that means like, are you in a gang? Are you blood? Are you Crip? You Latin King? Like
Gotcha.
they're trying to
All right.
identify who you are. Because another thing that I heard is which was true when I came to be on Rikers Island, it's not really about gangs on Rikers Island. It's more of kind of like ethnicity. The
Yeah.
Spanish people, the Spanish, the whites, and the blacks. That's really
Yeah.
how it
I've
is.
seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but my time on Rikers, thankfully, it was short-lived for about 2 to 3 weeks, but it felt like years. Because it was constantly waking up, seeing new faces coming in and out, seeing arguments between other juveniles and fights, and it was just scary. And then at one point, I got transferred to a unit, and on this unit, the staff, it was a little smaller unit, so maybe about 15 to 20 youth, but the staff made you walk around the beds. So if I wanted to get to the phone, which was right here, and my bed was near the phone, you couldn't just walk this way directly to the phone. There was a rule on the unit, and you had to walk all around everyone's bed just to get to the phone, and that was intimidating because you try to avoid people in there, but the staff kind of force you to do that. And on the first day, I got to that unit. I remember there was a big brawl with some other kid that transferred with us. Um, there was two pods. We called them pods. On the left pod, it was mostly Hispanics, and on the right pod, it was mostly blacks and whites and some Hispanics. But I ended up going to the pod where the staff put me on the blacks, the whites, and some Hispanics. And this kid, he just jumped like the whole room, just charged him when he went in. Come to find out, he was actually in a juvenile detention facility, and he had issues with somebody who was on a Spanish pod. So they had sent a message to people on the other pod that basically to jump him. So
he got jumped by everybody?
Got jumped by everybody. Got jumped by everybody. The crazy thing, and this is the circle of life. When I got on that pod, there was a kid I was in Crossroads with. So we were both older. We recognized each other from when we were younger in Crossroads together. But I was so scared. I was so scared that I didn't want nobody knowing who I was or anything like that.
Yeah.
I remember telling him, I don't recognize you. I don't know you.
Really?
Yeah. I remember telling him that. And I at the time, I'm like, why am I saying this to him? Maybe it's a good thing that we know each other because he's been here longer than me. But I was like, you don't know me. I don't remember you. So it was a weird experience.
And he was saying like, I recognize you from
Definitely.
Yeah. Wow.
I recognize you. Are you sure? You look familiar. So you start giving the face, like, you maybe you're lying to me.
What's with the bed thing? Like, why did they make you walk just so they could see that you had nothing on you, or?
I never understood that rule. I never went up to the staff and asked why you make us do this because, I just myself.
Yeah.
I thought it was a thing, kind of like you need to get used to where you're going to be living, and to force you to get used to everyone. You're going to have to walk around. Everyone's going to see you, and you're going to see them, kind of thing. That's what I believed it to be, but I wasn't entirely sure.
Right. Okay. So wow, that's crazy. Thanks for sharing all that with us. That's certainly a backstory. So like, tell us like the bridge between that, like the motivation to turn around, and like when you decided, I'm going to go to law school. Like when did you get your undergrad, and like tell us like how you made that turnaround.
So after Rikers, I eventually got out on Rikers Island. I think it was either a little before or after Christmas that year. and I was able to fight my case from the outside. I remember going before the judge, and the judge told me straight up, if convicted, you can get at least 5 years for this. And that's just scared the shit out of me hearing that, because I'm like, you're going to send me back to that place for 5 years? There's no way I'm going back there. So at that point is when I really changed my life. I was already in college at the time, but I was doing poorly in college. I mean, I think I had like a 0.3, 0.2 GPA. It was terrible. I
Okay.
was barely going to class. I was studying architecture, something I didn't even like.
Wow.
So I changed. I decided to change my life. I changed my schools. I went into criminal justice at American Intercontinental University. It was an online school that I went to.
Okay.
Crazy thing. When I was fighting my case where I went to Rikers for, I actually started an internship at the district attorney's office in Manhattan.
Wow.
On the questionnaire, it says, do you have a pending or open case? And I put yes. I guess they must have overlooked this, that I had a case, because it came up during my internship. I got pulled into the office by a supervisor. She was very nice. She loved me. And she told me that her supervisors were trying to get rid of me because I had this pending case, but she had fought for me to stay there because I was honest about it. I didn't lie about it. They just overlooked it, the investigators. But that was a crazy thing. I was going to court in Staten Island, criminal court, but
Wow.
going to an internship in Manhattan at the district attorney's office.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a
That is
crazy.
crazy. How do you get that internship like so young and like college kid? I mean, because New York, that by nature of New York is just like so competitive. So
It is. It is very competitive. When I started my new school, I had a high GPA. I was up there in the 3.9s. I was very involved with school, and I eventually became a security guard. So I think all that culminated into I guess a good application when I applied.
okay.
I wanted to be a lawyer.
Yep.
Um, and
So what made you? What was the moment that you said, "I want to be a lawyer"?
the moment was, well, initially I wanted to be like something with the police, law enforcement.
Okay.
And then I realized I could do something much more, because there was a time when I was fighting my juvenile delinquency case. I felt like my lawyer, like I barely saw the guy. I barely saw the guy, but only see the guy like the day of court. And the day
Yeah.
of court, as a
Right.
juvenile delinquent, they take you to the courthouse and you're downstairs in this little cage waiting for your case to be called.
Right.
And he only spoke to me like literally 5 minutes before court was called. So I barely had any time to speak to him about my case. And I just felt like I was unheard. I was unrepresented. There was evidence that I wanted him to present. Because my juvenile delinquency, while to this day, I acknowledge that I was found to be a juvenile delinquent, I always maintain my innocence up until till today. On my bar application, I had to talk about this stuff. And I even said, I recognized I was found guilty, but I maintain my innocence. So I was wrongfully convicted for my juvenile delinquency. And to this day, I maintain that. And I felt like that was partly because I had a bad lawyer. And so that's what really pushed me to be a lawyer, to represent children in those situations, to advocate for them.
So okay. No, that's interesting. I think you sort of just answered my next question, which was how come like sort of like a family involved niche, which is kids, but not criminal defense?
Yeah. So I wanted to affect the system, to change the system, right? I know the system is a beast, child welfare, the juvenile justice system, but I wanted to have some influence on it from the inside. So my game plan was go to lawsuit, get my bar in New York, and go back to where it all happened. I came back to New York. I actually applied. My first job as a lawyer was working for the Administration for Children's Services as a lawyer. So I was a prosecutor in Manhattan for child abuse and neglect. So I spent almost 2.5 years there learning the ins and outs of cases, how they decide to file cases, what they do, their policies and procedures, learning the players, the CPS workers, foster care workers, things like that. After that, I said, okay, I think I know what I need to know here. The next phase is let's get some criminal experience so I can help represent children charged with crimes. So that's when I became an assistant district attorney in Kings County, where I worked in ECAB, the Early Case Assessment Bureau. And basically, I was tasked with assessing arrests. An arrest would come in. I'm on the phone with the arresting officer. We're talking about the evidence. I'm talking to victims. I'm watching body cam. photos, videos. So
Wow.
I'm drawing up the actual charges. I'm deciding what to charge somebody at that point, misdemeanor felonies. And I'm also working in arraignment. So I'm standing up on cases, recommending bail or releases, and are asking for order protections, all kinds of things. But at that point, um, that's why and I worked on a lot of cases, and I think I was there for a little over a year, but I worked on a whole bunch of cases because you can imagine how many arrests are coming in all the time. And there's not a lot of us in that bureau. So I felt like I gained the requisite knowledge I needed for criminal law, understanding the basic components of what makes up a crime and the processes, and things like that. And then I saw this opportunity come along to be what they call in New York City or New York State an 18B assigned counsel.
Right.
So what that basically is you have these institutional providers, Legal Aid Society, the Bronx Defenders, things like that.
Hmm.
So the cases will go to them first. However, there's conflicts on cases. Sometimes they can't take the individual, they can't represent them. So that's where the assigned counsel plan comes in. It's a bunch of private attorneys who've been qualified to be appointed by the court to represent children or parents in certain cases. So they have family court panels, criminal court panels, homicide panels, things like that. I decided I needed to be on the family court panel because not only was it dealing with child abuse, neglect, foster care, custody, all those issues I was involved with as a child. It also dealt with juvenile delinquency. Children are charged in family court as juveniles, and I knew that's where I wanted to be. So that's where my career really kicked off as a private practitioner.
Wow, that's like unbelievable. So what like keeps you motivated? What keeps you going? And I want to know what your law school experience was like too. Not
Yeah.
to take it back a couple roads, but I'm just curious
Yeah.
about that.
So my I'll start with the law school experience. I I loved it. I absolutely did. I was involved in a lot of like clinics.
Yep.
This
So
is my
smart. That's the best
yeah,
thing you can do.
yeah. Clinics, trial team. I was in a domestic violence clinic, helping survivors of domestic violence. I was in like a family law clinic, actually dealing with child abuse, neglect in North
Yep.
Carolina, a criminal justice clinic, learning that, I remember I stood up on a case in North Carolina as a law student, um, in a criminal justice clinic. And I remember I was so nervous. It was hard to get words out my mouth when I first stood up, but
Yeah.
I was involved. Like I took advantage of the programs, the classes, they had, especially trial team. I did that for almost 2 years in law school. I started that early on, and that helped build my foundation for the work I knew I was going to do, as a trial attorney, in New York.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome.
But what
So
I know you had the other question was
yeah.
what keeps me going. What keeps me going, honestly, is the families, the kids. Like you have these cases, especially the child abuse cases and neglect cases. There's so many of them. These families are separated for years on end. Whether I'm representing a parent or a child, it's a mistake. You know, it's a mistake in parenting sometimes. Sometimes some of these parents need help, but it's with the kids at the end of the day are the ones most affected because they have no idea why they just were removed from their parent, unless they're a little older. But even then, that causes some damage to them. It's reuniting these kids safely with these parents because if we do not do that, if we do not actually help these families reunite and strengthen, the weaknesses that cause them to end up in these situations, it's going to affect them in the long run. I don't have a relationship now with my parents because of being in foster care
Yeah.
because that wasn't really emphasized. At some point, going to visits, um, when I got a little older, was kind of like an annoyance to me. It's like, why am I going to visits? I should just be
Gotcha. Yeah.
with my mom. Like, why am I? I don't need. Shouldn't have to go see her at a building and supervised by a social worker or something like that.
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to prevent for these kids in foster care because I know the long term effects it has. Being their voice. I barely went to court as a kid in the system. So making sure, especially my younger clients, sitting down, speaking with them, explaining the process, asking, what they want out of this, and going to court and fighting for that. And it doesn't have to be something as big as I want to go home now. Like I just had a case a couple of weeks ago. This adolescent, she's 19 years old, but she's still in foster care. She didn't have a cell, and the agency's refusing just to pay for a cell phone. And I presented the argument to the court, said, Judge, She's in foster care. ACS is acting in local parentis as her parent. If she would have been home, she more than likely would have had a cell phone because her parents would have paid for it. So why they can't pay for a cell phone for her? She's a young adult. She has a kid on her own on the way. So we need to raise the standard. We need
Yeah.
to raise the bar of how we're treating these kids in foster care, not doing the bare minimum. If we really want them to change in the future, then we need to do things now that's going to affect them.
Wow.
And
That
something
what
as
a,
simple as having a phone goes a long way, you
wow.
know?
That's great. I mean, you could probably write like a big like thesis on how to, change the foster care system. Do you keep in touch with any of your? I know you said your biological parents or whatever, maybe not. But what about any foster care parents that you were friendly with, or any foster homes out of like the 24 you said you were at?
Yes. So I am close. One of them actually lives in Staten Island. And
Yeah,
we text sometimes or on social media, we write each other. And I actually call her mom because I felt that that's what she was to me
that's nice.
when I
Wow.
was in foster care. There's another guy, I was in juvenile detention. He was a worker there. And when I got out, he actually stood in touch with me to be a mentor. Like this guy went out his way. He paid for my cell phone bill. He bought me clothes. I was in foster home sometimes I was hungry, no food, or they would lock the fridge at night. Can you imagine being in a foster home and they lock the fridge? But if you're home,
Really, a foster home does that?
foster home,
They shouldn't call it a home then. They should call it
and
foster, roof or something.
exactly. Kids get taken away if parents do that stuff. But in a foster home, it kind of like under the radar when you complain about it. The foster parent was, oh, that's not true. He's lying. It's not true. But I remember this guy used to buy me food. He used to take me shopping at Costco or he used to come over, bring me food. And I had a relationship with him since maybe 10 years already. I mean, I know his kids. I call him Pops sometimes. So he's like my father, my mentor. Um, so I definitely built ties and relationships with some people along the way that would genuinely cared about me and genuinely helped me.
That's amazing. Like, what advice would you give somebody who's trying to redirect their life into like maybe a more positive direction?
I would say you really have to take a step back and think to yourself, do you want to be that statistic? In life, we're all given labels, right? I was given a label, foster child, juvenile delinquent, criminal defendant. Do you want your life to be defined by what people give you, or do you want to tear off that label and come up with your own? That's why I put that tagline, former foster child, former juvenile delinquent.
Yeah.
You gave me that label, but let's read after that. Attorney, former prosecutor, right? You define your own path in life, regardless of the circumstances. You just have to decide to do it. We're all given a choice.
It's amazing, and what a mentor you can be to kids and everything right now. So, like you say, your story that because of your personal and professional experiences, you could provide your clients with uniquely tailored and insightful representation. I agree with that. I've seen it on other episodes and people who are immigrants who become immigration attorneys, that sort of thing. So tell us more about it. I mean, I
So,
think you kind of touched on it already,
so,
but maybe if you want to touch on it again a little bit.
yeah, it's a different type of representation when you have somebody who's been in your shoes. On my client interviews all the time, I say, listen, I know what you're going through, and I share with them whether I've been in foster care, whether I've been a juvenile delinquent. If it's a parent, I've had a mother who was charged as a neglectful parent. I know what you're going through. Or I was a former ACS prosecutor. I know this system. I know what you need to do. We're going to get through this together, right? It's kind of being on this journey with them together, letting them know it's going to be okay. You're with somebody who has not only the professional experience, but the lived experience, who's been through this system. That makes a lot of my clients much more comfortable, especially my older my child clients, the older ones who understand they're in foster care and they're trying to get their life back on track, especially with them, because adolescents can be a little standoffish or hard to communicate with because they have they're stubborn. But once I break that barrier with them, like, listen, I know what you're going through. I've been there. You want a phone? You need keys to the house? You want some clothes?
Yeah,
We're gonna get you that. Okay. And you hear me in court advocate for them, and it's a different type of representation, because it's not just zealous representation. I make sure it's felt that these
Right.
children, what they need, it's not just they're complaining about something. And something as simple as an allowance, a sufficient allowance every week, keeps them out of trouble, keeps them from, going to the streets and doing things they're not supposed to be doing, having clothes on their back. I had a kid a couple of weeks ago who said, "Mr. Dross, I don't have the sneakers that I want."
Yeah.
And I remember speaking to other attorneys about it. One of the attorneys was like, "Well, they give him sneakers." I said, "Sure, they give him Skechers, but this guy he wants Nikes."
Yeah.
You got to stop providing the bare minimum. If we're not supposed to treat them differently than other kids who are not in foster care, then that's
And
what
if we have a Skechers representative listening out there, like, we're not dissing on the Skechers. I mean, we do like the
definitely
Nikes.
not.
We do like the Nikes, but I'm just kidding. There's no Skechers people listening. Okay, so go ahead. Yeah, I get what you're saying. You have to stop treating them, as second class people, and give
exactly
give them some higher end or some stuff like that they want, So
different experience for my clients. Me having been on the inside, and
right.
different for them, because they feel more confident. They really do about their case, because it's kind of, now they trust the advice I'm giving to them. Is kind of like,
Right.
he's just another lawyer. I'm just another case. He cares about me. I'm going to listen to him. I'm going to follow his advice. So it's just different.
So when did you know it was time to launch your own law firm?
It was actually, I pondered on it for months before launching my own law firm. This opportunity arose, I think it was October, when I just made a year at the DA's office. And it was a short window to make a decision. So I said to myself, let me just put the application in, and I can always just say no at the end. A couple months later, 3 months later, January, I found out I got accepted to be on the side counsel plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it was like, I was speaking to my wife. I'm like, are we going to take this leap? Because now, we got to pay for insurance ourselves. We got to cover overhead for running a firm.
Right.
And these are people's lives. And, you can't just mess up. It's not like I can go to my supervisor and they can cover for me.
Oops, sorry about that. Yeah.
Or there's like a policy or something.
Yeah.
But I said, no, I want to do this, because I know I want to do this 20 years from now, but why wait 20 years when this opportunity has come 5 years in to being an attorney?
Awesome. Yeah.
So I took that leap, and it's paid off in dividends, and I don't regret it. I don't regret it. Yeah.
Congrats. So tell us what type of cases in particular, like, you're handling right now.
Yeah. A lot of my cases are child protective. So that's child abuse, child neglect cases. I handle voluntary foster care placement. You can actually place a child into foster care voluntarily as a parent or guardian. So a lot of the times I either represent the child that's been placed or the parent who's signing an agreement, because a lot of these people don't understand what they're getting themselves into once you place a child into foster care.
Right.
It's a whole process. So I do those cases. I do order of protection cases for victims of domestic violence, getting orders of protection in family court, juvenile delinquency cases representing children charged with crimes, the custody cases, visitation cases, grandparent visitation, guardianship cases, anything that has to do with family court and family law, I'm there.
How do those cases get to you, by the way?
So what happens as an 18B attorney, 18B attorney, you have to sign up actually for intake shifts. You have to do 6 shifts every 6 months. At least you can do more. So you'll come to court and you'll sit there all day, and you'll wait for an email or a call from the judge to come to the courtroom, and that's how you get assigned the case. So you build your caseload like that.
Gotcha. Do you take the case that day?
Take the case that day. You do the arraignment that day if there's an arraignment. So that's when the case starts. And some of these cases, they take years, especially the foster care cases.
So what do? You get the case, you're in court for that day, and then something comes across your desk. What do you do? What's your process?
So you go to court, you get the case, the client's information, you get the file number, docket number. After court's over, after you're done with your intake shift, because remember, you get one case and then you're getting called into another courtroom for another case.
Right.
Wait till your shift's over. So you come up, at the end of the day, maybe 10, 15 cases you got for the day, if it's a busy day. And then you start calling your clients, review the file numbers, you make a file for them, you interview your clients in person, if they're able to meet in person. And then you go over what stage of the case they're in, what they're looking at, whether it's pretrial, post-trial, post-disposition, or something like that. So you're just viewing the case with them and giving them advice, and then you're appearing at the next court date, whether it's a court conference.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like that. Yeah.
So you're just kind of kicking the case off with them, and okay,
yeah.
Good. So what would you say the what would you say the Dross Law Firm represents?
My law firm, the Dross Law Firm, represents raw experience, hands down. It's that experience that no other attorneys, or very, very few other attorneys have. Yeah. I know a lot of attorneys, and I don't think I know another attorney who's actually been in foster care as well as a juvenile delinquent and on Rikers Island. Okay. So what the Dross Law Firm represents is that raw experience, that if we've been there, we've done that, and we got your back, and we're going to get through this together.
Wow. That's powerful, man. I love that.
Yeah.
And any way I can ever help you, introduce you to anybody, make warm introductions, somebody you think that you can benefit from or could have a mutual sort of a relationship with, let me know.
Thank you.
Tell me what unique qualities or attributes distinguish you from other attorneys practicing in your field.
Yeah. So it definitely goes back to that hands-on experience, that lived experience, going into courtroom, and even the judges knowing that I used to be in foster care. A lot of the judges know I used to be in foster care. So when I speak, I'm heard. Okay. I make sure I'm heard because I'm speaking from a point of experience, not just to rumble on. And I'm telling you, we need to do this, or we should do this because I've been there. And so that's a very unique quality as an attorney that transitioned from being in the system as a child.
Now, are you starting to see the same judges as you go before the courts?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know all those judges. It's kind of, you see the same judges all the time.
Okay. And anybody from when you were younger and going through the system, or no?
Not in Manhattan,
okay.
But I am in touch with the judge in Staten Island when I was in foster care, who knew me as a child. I actually visit her. At least I try to visit her once a year.
Okay.
And some of my siblings are still in foster care, so they're still in Staten Island Family Court, actually.
Okay. Yeah. So that you must have really younger siblings.
I have really younger siblings. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So all right, go ahead. Sorry, the unique qualities that distinguish you from other attorneys practicing in your area.
Yeah. So it's that lived experience. It's the ability to be flexible. And the flexibility, what I mean by that, it comes from, moving foster home to foster home, being empathetic to my clients, their children or adults, to their situation, understanding that this is probably one of the toughest things they're going through in their lives in family court, right? Whether they're a victim, domestic violence, or they're going through child abuse or neglect proceedings or foster care proceedings, being able to relate to them. It's a different type of attorney-client relationship, a different type of trust. I get texts from clients all the time. Thank you so much, Mr. Dross. I'm grateful to have you in my corner. You have my back. You understand. I'm just not another case. I've been some of these clients. They have been through old attorneys. I'm like maybe the second, third, or fourth attorney coming on the case because they couldn't work with their old attorney because that attorney maybe doesn't answer their phone, or their emails. Me, I'm the type, listen, I'm your lawyer. We need to be on the same page going into these cases. So I'm fine with giving clients my phone number to text, right? You can reach me 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, 4 in the morning. I have clients text me 2 in the morning sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's fine because it's a different type of connection that we have. It's a lot of trust there. And that trust goes a long way in an attorney-client relationship.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. So we talked about the 18B panel in Manhattan. So what qualities, if they don't if an attorney doesn't have like the experience, like your experience and like what you've gone through is rare, right? For an attorney, like, but what qualities would you say someone needs to have to be able to work with kids and take on these issues that they face?
Definitely working with kids, you need to have patience because these are kids. I mean, clients I have are from babies up to children 21. They're technically adults, but we consider them children still if they're in the system. So you need to have patience. You need to be able to break complicated things down, such as what is neglect, what is a trial, what is this foster care system to somebody who's 5, somebody who's 7, and need to understand that the next time you meet them, they may forget what you discussed previously with them.
Right. Okay.
So you need to be constant in that child's life. It's not an adult where you can maybe meet with them once or twice a month as a client. This child maybe need to meet with them more than once. Maybe need to call them every week just so they get used to your voice and recognize that you're their lawyer. You're not just. Sometimes they get confused, like you're a social worker or a case planner.
Right.
So just being very involved and hands-on, especially with children who have no idea what's going on, is a big quality or trait that you need to work with children, and being patient, being understanding, being empathetic with them. These are kids, they're really innocent kids, and they have no idea what's going on in their life. And they're separated from the ones that they love.
Yeah, totally.
That's trauma in and of itself. Some of these kids are actually abused or neglected, some of them are not. There's kids in foster care who something happened to their siblings because they happened to their siblings. Now they're also in foster care. Okay.
Right.
So then they start blaming their siblings, or they'll blame themselves or something like. So you're kind of a therapist as a lawyer.
Oh yeah, I feel like you've seen it all when it comes to this this type of law. So Arique, did we leave anything out today? Do we not cover anything that you wanted to speak about?
No, I think I talked about everything. I feel very good about this.
Good. Yeah, no, this was awesome, man. I really appreciate your time. You have an incredible story. It's gonna get out there. It's got to get out there. What you've gone through and how far how much you've accomplished. So if there isn't anything else, like is there? So there's nothing else that
Nothing else.
Okay, we're good. So
Okay.
Arique Dross, New York City. Thank you so much, man, for coming on. I appreciate it, and stay right there. Everybody else, wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourselves. Cheers.